speak, you can. I want answers from you. Why do we need to understand America? Yes, please. Right. So he has, in a nutshell, he has talked about the history. But then, yes, please.
For their writing approach.
For their writing approach.
Because they avoid a traditional linear approach.
Okay, right. Okay. But how are we as Indians connected with America? Is there any influence of America on us? Is there any influence of America on us? Yes? What kind of influence it is? Yeah, ગુજરાતીમાં બોલી શકો છો તમે. That is the migration. People are migrating from India to America. It's a one-way migration, right? Immigration. It's one-way immigration. Okay. Yeah. But are we in the, you are all in, I mean, I am also influenced by America. We are all sitting here. We are all influenced by America. Yes, please. Democratic way of thinking. Okay. So, that is all our mental, but yes, please.
In our constitution, fundamental rights.
Fundamental rights.
We inspire from the right.
Okay. So, okay. Do you use WhatsApp? How many of you use WhatsApp? All? How many of you use Instagram? Okay. So all of you use social media? If I send you a message, where does the message go? Does it come to you in a flash of a second? But from where does it come to you? In a flash of a second, it goes to America and comes to you. Who is the owner of WhatsApp? Yeah, it goes to Meta, it comes to you in a nanosecond, right? So whatever we talk, whatever we send each other, who is controlling? America. America is controlling our life. How many of you are using Apple phone, iPhone? How many of you are wearing that iPhone watch? Yeah, so my point is, okay, my point is, what I want to tell you is that why do we need to understand American literature? It's we need to understand America. Someone who is controlling, some nation that is controlling each and every activity. In 1984, 1984 is a novel by George Orwell, and it was written in 1948, published in 1949, and there he says that America is a big brother. The big brother is watching you. So if there is something goes wrong and our IB requires some chat between two people, any kind of crime happens, they contact FBI, they contact CIA, right? Because all the data is there with America. So America is controlling us. We need to understand this. If we want to become Vishwaguru, we need to understand someone who controls us. We need to talk in the same language, the way our masters are speaking to us. Correct? So for that, this literature, you know that any literature is a reflection of society, of human life. And in order to understand literature of that particular nation, we need to understand the history. We cannot avoid history and talk about literature. Uh, America has been divided into two parts. The continent America that I'm talking about, it's been divided into North America and South America, that is the Latin America. Now you know the map of America, correct? Am I right? No, when we are talking about American literature, I am talking about North American literature. And that, you know the map. Uh, maybe if it is visible, right? It is visible, correct? So this is the map of America, and who discovered America? Did he discover America? In which year? Very nice. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, an Italian sailor, he was funded by the Queen of Spain to find out, did he go for America? Did he? No. What was it? He was in search of India. But when he reached, one thing is, Christopher Columbus never ever entered the land of America as such, the land that we know today. He had 4 voyages to America, but not to America, but to Trinidad, Tobago, West Indies, right? He never stepped on the land called America. But as you rightly pointed out, who entered America first? Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian merchant who had, maybe you can, this is from the history book, that he had entered the land for the first time, and therefore the land is known in the name of Amerigo, right? But when he entered the land, what was the land looking like? I mean, if you have read the history, the image of America that we have today is a land of urbanization, land of cities. Was it like that? No. There were only forests. So it was full of natural resources. And you know that was around the 16th century in England. There was a lot of political upheaval going on. There was a kind of civil war situation in England due to the persecution of Catholics and Protestants, and the Protestants were Henry VIII, the father of Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. He was a Protestant, and the Catholics decided to leave England. Correct? You know the history of English literature, and so majority of them, they started leaving England. And they heard about it thanks to Columbus, thanks to these merchants, that they heard about a land which is 20 times bigger than England. America is 20 times in geographical conditions, it is 20 times bigger, and therefore endless possibilities for natural resources, right? So when these people, they reached they decided to leave England, and those who were not happy with the kingdom, they reached there in around 1620 in a ship called Mayflower 2. Mayflower 2. But before that, there were settlers from France, from Spain, who had entered the land. And you know, now new history is coming up telling us that Indians had explored. Indian means we Indians had explored that land 2000 years back. And I think Gayatri ma'am, who has done her PhD in Caribbean literature, She can tell us more about that. That Indians had already reached those places. Like when Columbus reached West Indies, there were Indians who were into agricultural land. I mean, into agrarian industries and services. So the point is, when we talk about American literature, we talk about the years starting from 1500 to 1620. Now I'm coming to semester 6 syllabus. The first time period that is given to us is from 1500 to 1620. Now get ready for 2020. If you want to remember the years 1500 to 1620, 1620 to 1720, 1720 to 1820, 1820 to 1920, easy to remember. It is not like in English history. So when these people, these colonizers, the European colonizers, when they entered the land, it was a barren land. It was known as the Virgin Land. We know Virginia, the state of Virginia, where they settled first. And was it land without people? There used to be people, right? We'll be living there. How do we know them? Right. Now they are known as Native Americans. Right. Red Indian is now a term that has been banned by U.S. government. Because it's a colored term, right? So it's now they are known as Native Indians, Native Americans. So when these settlers went there, the land was occupied by these native people, and these people were like in their tribal ways of living. So there was no formal education. They had their own literature that we know as folk literature, right? And there are stories, there are tales, and these settlers who were civilized, who were educated. We know that. How old is Oxford University? How old is Oxford University? 1400 years, right? Cambridge is 1200 years. So these settlers, when they went there, they were majority of them, they were educated and they knew how to read and write. So they started documenting these Native American stories on pages. And therefore, the earliest literature means something that is written, right? Something that is in the oral form is called orature. Orature. So orature started becoming literature on pages, and these European settlers, they started documenting these stories, and therefore now we know that doesn't mean that there was no literature. Orature, there used to be a tradition of songs, tricksters' tales, and mythologies and wonderful stories. But then since we get them on pages from 1500 to 1620. In 1620, the first troop of European settlers in a huge number, they entered the land near Virginia, and there they started, they used all their tactics to grab the land, to encroach the land from the natives. There is a wonderful book called Guns, Germs and Steels. They used three things. Guns, because see the tribal, there used to be 150 tribes in America when the settlers went there. There used to be Cherokees, there used to be Havasupai, different kinds of tribes. They were not acquainted with, or maybe they were not into this weaponry probably, and these people, these Europeans, had guns, so they used guns to kill them. Germs, there is a story which is written in this book where there was a Dr. Amherst who took with him blankets for these naive native people, and these blankets were full of germs. You know how germs can spread easily like coronavirus, right? So this Dr. Amherst, he gifted people with blankets full of germs, and overnight he killed thousands of natives. And it's been documented in this book. And the wonderful thing about America is that they document each and everything. You know, as you rightly pointed out, that they have democratic values because America is the first democracy, right? America is the first democracy, and so they have very high value system for democratic values, and they never hide anything. So they have published this book which says that Mr. Amherst, there is a city called Amherst, which is the capital of Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a state on the northern side of America. So stills, guns, jumps, and stills. Still is they started during 17th, 18th century. These European settlers started having machines and factories, and so they started um, grabbing lands from these people. So these are the tactics. Coming back to 1620, when these settlers came, land was what of Native Americans. How Native Americans used to look. Let me show you. I think maybe you can see the picture. Maybe if it is visible, right? Uh, what is it? The dream catcher. Have you heard about dream catcher? Yes. So it is native to Native Americans, right? So this was the society when the Mayflower had entered, and these Europeans, they were all civilized people. I don't know, I think this may not be visible, but they were civilized people with, weapon and suit and boot, and the natives were living more with nature. When the New England settlers, they came to America, some of them, they started offering gifts to the natives. And when the natives started accepting the gift, that was on the 21st November, it was a Thursday, it was a third Thursday of the month of November, which is known as Thanksgiving. Right? That was in 1621. They celebrate as Thanksgiving that the natives accepted gifts from European settlers, means we are ready to accept you. Then these Europeans started having their colonies. Initially, there were 13 colonies. So the flag of America had 13 stars. Now, how many stars are there in the flag of America? How many states are there? Initially, there were 13 colonies, therefore, there were 13 stars. Now, how many states are there? 50. 50. Right? So, there are 50 stars at present, and I sometimes laughingly say that Israel is the extended state of America. So, soon they will have 51 stars, So there used to be 13 colonies. These colonies, these Europeans, they required man force, the labor force, and for that they brought slaves from Africa. How many countries are there in Africa? Hard question. When we say Africa, we have a vision of Africa as only one nation, But how many countries are there? How many nations? There are 54. 54 countries in Africa. It's a huge continent. So from 54 countries, they started bringing slaves. As per the history, in 200 years, more than 1 crore slaves were brought to America as per history. But imagine that when they were brought here, this is a sketch from the history book that in this condition, these are the Africans sitting in a steamer. They were brought to America from Africa. Now, what happened was that these Africans they used to speak different languages. When I say Asia, we have so many countries in Asia, and all of us we speak different language. So if we are traveling with a Bangladeshi, with a Sri Lankan, with a Pakistani, with an Afghani person, we don't know our language, right? The same thing happened with these people. Europeans were so smart that they brought Africans from different regions. So they could not unite. Language is a unifying force. And so these people could not unite immediately. The first generation had a difficulty. They could recognize each other that the person is from my continent, but they could not unite immediately. And these people were brought to a place, an island called Long Island. First, they were brought to Long Island near New York. There, they were physically checked, and then those who could work on the farm instead of a bullock. Have you read Uncle Tom's Cabin? Right? So we know that instead of a bullock, these Africans were used as animals in the farm. So those who had that strength, physical strength, they were allowed to enter into America. The others were sent to southern part of America, that is the southern part of the continent. And so therefore we have many Africans in Brazil. I mean, people of African origin even today. If you look at the football team of Brazil, you will see Pele, you will see Diego Maradona, having African origin. Why there are Africans? Because it was during 16th 17th century that majority of the people were sent to Latin America, to these countries. And so only those who were capable, physically capable, they were allowed inside the land. So these Africans, when they entered to educate them, these Europeans started having missionary schools for the Africans. So the first thing was to convert them from their original religion to Christianity, and majority of the Europeans who had left England were Puritans. So they started. So the first literatures that we find between 1620 and 1720 is the literature of religious writings, and these writings were in the form of diaries, journals, and then later from England came the printing press. So these diaries and journals were handwritten, majority of them were handwritten, and they were written in plain style so that people could understand. And then there was also preaching, preaching from Bible, from church. So we know William Bradford and other writers who started publishing their philosophical works for the African people. And the natives, they were left in a very less number. Because of this, they could not survive with the conditions, the agrarian conditions that these Europeans wanted to have. These natives were not brought up in those conditions. So majority of them, they had Spanish flu, they died in Spanish flu, in plague, in other fevers. So the number was less, but then the focus was, I mean, when we come to literature, their focus was also Africans instead of Native Americans. So these preaching diaries were for Africans. Then we see from 1720 to 1820, we come to next century, that is the revolutionary age for America, when people like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, they wanted to have independence from, okay, on which day America celebrates its independence? 4th of July. Why do they, I mean, from whom did they get independence? From Britishers. So they, in a way, they did not have any kind of struggle, you know. It was on paper that they had fight with the Britishers. So, but this idea of nation, it came up only with the idea of being different from the Britishers. When I say that I am an Indian, how am I an Indian? It is in the comparison with someone, you know. So, in comparison with Britishers, they started establishing their identity, and so poets started writing war poetry. There were writers, you know, in their own languages, uh, for something that even the Africans could understand. And George Washington in 1776, we know that America became independent. He was the first president. And so, in the political writings and even in the literary writings, it was the spirit of nationalism that we can see. Uh, so, Thomas Paine, he was one of the founding writers, the founder of a book called Common Sense. And from 1820, we get America, which is independent. And so, when we talk about America, actually the literature begins after 1830. When people of America, they could realize that they were Americans, and so we have 5 writers from 1820 to 1920 that ruled the scenario, literary scenario of America. And according to some of the historians, the history begins with Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson is considered to be the founding father of American literature because he introduced many genres like poetry, essay. Under his influence, Thoreau, he started writing, and they, in order to be different from the Britishers, they started introducing new kind of poetry, which they said as termed as transcendental poetry. Transcendentalism is nothing but the spirit of reality, of spirit of the nature. The mantra for Europeans was going back to return to nature. For these people, it is the spirit of nature. You know that that is the real spirit, and for that they started exploring Indian literature, especially Emerson. So when we talk about America, it doesn't mean that they were writing in isolation. You know, there is one, I have forgotten the name of that sailor. He was asked by Emerson to bring Hindu Bible from India. In the diary of that, I am forgetting the name of that sailor. So he was asked to bring the Hindu Bible from India for Emerson, and that Hindu Bible was Srimad Bhagavad Gita, right? So Emerson started reading Bhagavad Gita. He gave that to Thoreau. So when we read Walden Pond, Walden is a treatise. Right. There is a poem called Brahma by Emerson, um, and they refer to Upanishad. Why do they refer to Upanishad? Why do? Because in Indian scriptures they could find that idea of spirit, the idea of nature, the idea in a very different way. The idea of peace in India is very different. When we say Om Shanti, that Shanti is that peace is for each and every element of the nature. And when the idea of Western peace is a time period between two wars, right? The idea of peace, it is always war and peace. So that peace, the idea of peace, Shanti, was new. It was something convincing for these people, and so they even to T.S. Eliot. When we come to later part of American literature, T.S. Eliot also used the same concept of Shanti. So anyway, so these people, uh, the transcendentalists, they are also known as that period is also known as American Renaissance, and it is a romantic age, and so we can see the reverence of nature dominated by poetry and prose, and there was also the rise of Gothic literature. Gothic literature, the horror literature, right? So that also started. Um, this was also the time when machines were introduced between 1820 and 1865. It was the Industrial Revolution at England and, of course, in America. So, man and machine, they became the major themes of literature. Um, and discarding the old ways of doing things that they used to do in Britain was the spirit of this romanticism. Now imagine that during 200 years of their settlement in America, the African writers, they also the African people, they also started getting educated. There was a third and the fourth generation with the single language, that is English, American English. They could unite. Their forefathers who could not unite, these people, they collectively started telling their stories. They started writing in poetry, and so by 1865 we get slave narratives, and there were writers like Emily Dickinson. One of the major writers were Melville and Hawthorne. Emerson and Thoreau, they used to say that there is goodness in nature, there is goodness in human nature also. Nature means outside, and human nature also. As their counterpart, as an antithesis, Hawthorne and Melville, they started writing that no, nature is not always tender towards human beings. There is a novel by Melville called Moby Dick. So the struggle of a sailor with a whale. With Hawthorne also, when you read his work, Scarlet Letter, human nature is not always good, kind of the counter narrative which was created by these two writers. Correct? So we get, and between the two, synthesizing both the voices was the third voice called Walt Whitman. And he started telling the people of America that uh, I sing for myself, I sing for America. So individualism it started, from romanticism, the narrative went to individualism. That it is me at the center of the nation. I am thinking, I am the voice of the nation kind of philosophy that started with Walt Whitman's The Leaves of Grass. It's a wonderful collection of poems and the poem itself. During this time also we find prose writings of Washington Irving and now America started having different voices, narratives from African writers, from British colonizers, from immigrants from Russia. Now understand that during 1880 and 1920, America required labor force and a different kind of skilled force that was in the northern part of America up to New York. The southern part of America was still the agrarian land where the Africans used to work, and there were color lines. America was divided into color lines because Africans were not allowed to go to other part of America. They were supposed to be living in the confined area of certain states where there was the agrarian land. They were having the crops of cotton, and then what else? They were producing cotton, wheat. There were certain other products that were so Africans were not allowed to go out of that. Now America started establishing factories for textile because the Europeans, they required cloth from. They could sense that in America they had more possibilities of getting cotton and then cotton cloth. So for skilled force, they looked back to Europe, and it was a time in history that a Tsar in Russia, he was persecuting the Jews. There was a place called Pale of Settlement in Russia, and the Jews, right? Jewish people. They were being forced out of that Pale of Settlement. They were being persecuted by the Tsar, and these people were good at sewing, knitting, tailoring, merchandise, everything, trading. So they left the land, they were exiled from that land to Poland, and from Poland they entered this America in the between 1880 and 1924. There were more than 17 lakh Jews. 17 lakh Jews, they entered New York. Imagine. In 30, so there is a map you can find on Google also that in area of 3.5 miles there used to live 3 lakh Jews at a time in ghettos in the New York area, which is known as Bronx. So these people, they started working in the factory. But these Russian Jews, when we look at the race, I don't want to make any racial comments, but their appearance was almost like the mainstream white Americans. So one could not recognize whether the person was the Christian American or the Jewish American. So now, because of these immigrants and major white people on the land, the Africans were under threat because from appearance, one could recognize, and so some of the writers, they started creating caricatures for the Africans, and that caricature is known as Jim Crow. Jim Crow. So Jim Crow is a caricature with a hat and a yellow coat and black coat, the hat the other side, on the other side of the, the front part of the hat on the other side, and a black coat, and I don't know whether you can see the caricature, Jim Crow. It was such a popular caricature for any African. They used the term Jim Crow, In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln, he intervened, and he could see that the land was falling apart. When you start cursing your own people, when you start, dividing your own people. So white Americans, when they started dividing with these slaves or Africans, uh, Abraham Lincoln, he brought out reforms in the constitution, and America became the land where there is no slave and there is no owner. He had to pay the price for this. Lincoln had to pay. He was assassinated. But that Emancipation Proclamation was one of the historical events that gave rights to Africans. But having rights on paper, it takes years to gather, to get accepted by the society, by people. And still this, these color lines, they continued. The brown part are the states from where the Africans could not travel to the northern part or the western or some of the middle parts of America. So these are the color lines of America. And this is one of the advertisements of selling slaves as Negroes. Now this word nigger or Negro is again banned in America, like Red Indians. So they were being sold on streets. In these conditions, they were kept. These Africans, you can see, inhuman conditions, they were kept on. They used to work on the fields of the southern part of America, on the cotton fields. So the first club that they started is also known as Cotton Club. This is a slave market in Georgia. This is a picture from 1864. This is a slave market where Africans were sold. And so we get the slave narratives during this period, and anti-slavery poems, anti-slavery fiction, and one of the well-known writers is Mark Twain. So it is not that only the Africans revolted against American system, but there were Americans themselves, sensible people like Mark Twain. Have you heard of Mark Twain? Yes. Have you read his book Tom Sawyer? You must read it. It is available online. Tom Sawyer and the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Wonderful books. They are the social documents of America during late 19th century, where two young boys, they try to save an African guy called Jim. Jim, I showed you that picture of Jim Crow. Any African would be termed as Jim. So with Jim, that must be an African person. And Tom and Huckleberry Finn, they save an African slave. Wonderful narratives. Mark Twain had visited India. Mark Twain had once visited India. That was in 1897, and he has a very a vivid sense of humor, where he says that, I have seen a land where people are trying to break a rock with a cloth. When he went to Mumbai, he saw people, cleaning the clothes. So Mark Twain મુંબઈમાં આવ્યા ત્યારે એમણે જોયું કે ધોબી ઘાટ ઉપર માણસો કપડાં ધુએ છે. ધોબી ઘાટ પર કપડાં ધુએ તો કેવી રીતે ધુએ, there used to be rock. તમે લોકો જૂના હિન્દી મૂવીમાં જોજો, મોટા મોટા પથ્થર ઉપર So he said કે માણસોને કપડાથી પથ્થર તોડતા જોયા મેં. That is India. So that kind of humor. So no, I'm just થોડા તમે બોર થઈ ગયા છો I know, પણ તેમ છતાં મારે થોડું તો so this was a time when civil war happened. અને no, I'll this is a picture from Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer na Huckleberry. This is Huckleberry fishing કરવા જાય છે. So and there are pictures also, movies also. તમે જોજો એને. So this time, and then we come to 20th century. Now we know that 20th century is full of two world wars. First World War, Second World War, and due to the World War, economic depression, the America that we, as you suggested, that it is economically superpower, it went into a great depression. This was the time when the Africans started moving from southern part of America to the northern part, and they started establishing their own clubs, their own literary circles. They started having their own voices, and they were the ones who said that we have lost faith in the American dream. Now, American dream is an element that you will find everywhere in the American literature, because as you rightly said that there is immigration to America. Why? Because it's a promised land. It is a golden land of opportunities, and therefore, so sometimes I tell my students laughingly that Columbus to Gujarati hato, you know. Every Gujarati would eye for America because there is some kind, there is a dream, you know. But during this period is known as Harlem Renaissance. There is a place called Harlem near New York, and the African writers started telling the white Americans that, you know, you have broken our dreams. It's called the dream deterred, and so the loss in American dream. There were playwrights called like Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller. They started writing against the mainstream American ideas, and also this was a time when the psychological theories of Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, they were becoming popular, and these writers started experimenting with these theories, and we get good plays that were being performed on the New York theater. It's called the Broadway theater. So plays like Eugene O'Neill's Desire Under the Elms, The Ape Man, they talk about the theories of Carl Jung, and then we go to the 21st century America. You know who are the authors known for their writing during 21st century? Jhumpa Lahiri, correct? Stephen King, she is Jhumpa Lahiri. Stephen King. Then, sorry? Mina Alexander. Maya Angelou. Parth Desai. Bharti Mukherjee. So now you know that the names, with the names you can recognize that there is a diversity. So from Emerson and Melville and Hawthorne and Thoreau, Emily Dickinson to Du Bois and then we have Toni Morrison, and now in 21st century, so from mainstream white Americans to African Americans to Indian Americans to Jewish Americans to Japanese Americans to Chinese Americans. So we have and the 21st century American fiction is majority is a science fiction, right? So Ursula K. Le Guin and Isaac Asimov. No, Isaac Asimov is 20th century. Sorry, but Ursula, and then we have Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling's. Then Ian Martell's Life of Pi. These are all known fiction. And Bob Dylan, lastly, he is the last Nobel laureate from America, Bob Dylan, and he is a professor at a university. He writes his own poetry, he composes his own poetry, and then he sings. So, and how America is a land with the highest number of Nobel Prizes for literature. There are 24 Nobel laureates. So we know that there are Nobel laureates like Toni Morrison, Saul Bellow, who is known for his novel Herzog, Eugene O'Neill, Ernest Hemingway. So students, I have tried to give you the history of America in a nutshell. I hope that this will be helpful to you for your studies, to semester 6 students and to the students of MA. Thank you very much for listening to me patiently.